Good evening, and welcome to the last session of Day 2 of CHCI's 2020 Leadership Conference. Thank you for joining us for the CHCI session, The Future of Entertainment. My name is Stefania Yanachkov, and I'm the Vice President of External Affairs at CHCI. I've been with the Institute for 4.5 years. On behalf of CHCI, I would like to thank the Entertainment Software Association, Walt Disney, Amazon, Netflix, and Starz for their generous support of this session. Before we begin our panel, I would like to introduce our panel host, Congressman Joaquin Castro, and our moderator, Beatrice Acevedo. Congressman Castro represents Texas's 20th Congressional District, which covers a large portion of San Antonio and Bexar County. Congressman Castro continues to be a tireless advocate for those who call San Antonio home. From supporting military families to investing in education, Representative Castro remains committed to helping mold an infrastructure of opportunity for San Antonians and Americans across the country. Congressman Castro serves on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, as well as the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the House Education and Labor Committee. He was the 2013 co-president for the House Freshman Democrats and currently serves as chair of the Texas Democratic Caucus. Congressman Castro is also the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. This panel will bring together representatives from the entertainment and media sector to discuss the future of entertainment and how we can foster greater diversity in the industry. To help us moderate this important and timely discussion, we're delighted to have three-time Emmy Award winner and tech media entrepreneur Beatrice Acevedo as our moderator. She is the co-founder of Me Too, the leading digital media brand for young Latinos in the U.S., and LA Collab, a Hollywood initiative to double Latino representation in Hollywood in front and behind the camera by 2030. Beatrice also serves as president of the Acevedo Foundation and CEO and co-founder of Summa Wealth, which was founded with the vision of closing the Latinx wealth gap. I hope you enjoy this session, and don't forget to continue the conversation on social media with the hashtag CHCIHHM20.
Hey y'all, I'm Congressman Joaquin Castro. I represent San Antonio, Texas, and chair the Congressional Hispanic Caucus this term. Welcome to the CHCI conference and this conversation about the future of entertainment. One of my priorities as chairman has been fostering greater diversity in the media industry. Over the past year, the CHC has met with Hollywood studios, major newspapers, publishing companies, advocacy groups, and key stakeholders about why Latino representation and portrayal matters. It matters because the media industry is unique in its ability to define the image of a group and further a narrative about who they are and what they stand for. It matters when the only part a Latino actor or actress can get in a movie is that of a drug lord or a gang member. That barrier not only limits their careers, but it also influences how an entire community is perceived and how we perceive ourselves. It matters when newspapers only hire a few Latino reporters and editors. It denies opportunities to a rising generation of Latino journalists, but also denies our community stories and the attention they deserve. Throughout the coronavirus crisis and throughout American history, Latinos have shown that we're resilient and essential, but too often we're also invisible. That invisibility allows many, including politicians, to treat us as disposable. With bigotry and hate against Latinos on the rise, like the violent El Paso massacre, it's more important than ever for our community to tell our stories and make our communities visible to all Americans. That's why it's on all of us to demand greater Latino representation across the media and entertainment industries. We have important stories to tell, compelling, universal stories that can help inspire a nation. The only thing missing is an industry willing to finally end the exclusion of Latinos and extend the opportunity, the camera, the pen, the resources, and the power to share our stories. Thank you, and enjoy the panel.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Beatrice Acevedo. I am the co-founder of La Collab, an initiative to double Latino representation in Hollywood in front and behind the camera by 2030. And I am honored to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to Congressman Joaquin Castro for his opening remarks and setting a great tone for our conversation here today. And thank you, of course, to CHCI for hosting this powerful leadership conference and deciding to focus on this very important topic that we will be addressing today, the future of entertainment. Please feel free to tweet your comments about this session, as we heard earlier, at hashtag CHCIHHM20. And participants, we want this to be as interactive as possible and hopefully hear from you. So please type your questions next to on the right-hand side of the box of your screen, and we will be addressing them later during our panel. I'm going to introduce now our panelists. We have an amazing group of people that I'm sure you will be very excited to hear from, very, very different perspectives from our industry. First, I want to introduce you to Stanley Pierre Lewis. He is the president and CEO of the Entertainment Software Association. The ESA serves as the voice and advocate for the 43.4 billion US video game industry, and Latinos contribute a lot to that number, I have to say. He'll talk a little bit more about that. Stan has more than 2 decades of experience working in entertainment as a corporate executive, including music, film, and television. Welcome, Stanley. Our next panelist is Ilana Peña. She is a creator, co-showrunner, and executive producer of Diary of a Future President, or what I like to call a unicorn in our industry. This series premiered January 2020 this year on Disney Plus and has been renewed for a second season. Thank you, Disney. It is very important that series like this continue to be renewed, as the message, as we just heard from Congressman Castro, is so important. A girl dreaming to be the next American president who happens to be a Latina. The series follows a young Cuban-American girl as she navigates the ups and downs of middle school. Already middle school is so complex, and her journey to becoming the future president of the United States. Ilana recently signed an overall deal with CBS Studios. Welcome to our panel, Ilana. I am so excited to have you. We also have Yolanda Guillen, who is a senior casting executive at Amazon Studios, where she's part of the U.S. casting team and oversees all casting for Mexico, Latin America, and Spain, in addition to scouting Latinx talent for Amazon Studios. She has cast more than 700 projects. I have been her client, so I've contributed to that number, and successfully worked with Sony Pictures TV, CBS, ABC, NBC, Disney, Nickelodeon, to name a few. And more on that, on how Latinos should always be supporting Latinos when they have the opportunity to hire them in this industry. We see that sometimes that is not the case, but we'll talk a little bit about that too. Jaime Davila, old friend, big fan of his work and his dad's work. I am older than Jaime, so I got to work with his dad in my previous life as a producer. Jaime is the president and co-founder of Campanario Entertainment. He's an executive producer of the upcoming Netflix original Selena, the series, a scripted series celebrating the life of Mexican-American singer and icon Selena Quintanilla. His company aims to create more opportunities for Latinos, and their slate includes Como Vivir Soltero for Amazon Prime, immigration documentary Colossus on Fuse, and the comedy Bridges that is in development at ABC. Welcome, Jaime. And certainly last but not least is Monica Raymond. She currently stars as Jackie Quiñones in the Starz hit original series Hightown. She previously starred as Gabriela Dawson on the NBC drama Chicago Fire, for which she won an Imagen Award for leading actress in a drama. Monica has also directed episodes of Law and Order, FBI on CBS, and Tanya, a short film for the Hidden Tears Project, which is a nonprofit media company bringing awareness to sex trafficking that has won multiple awards. So this is our amazing panel. Thank you all for being here. And let's get started. And let's get started with a little bit of data, so we can just level set of where we are. When we hear Congressman Castro saying, we're not enough, we're not represented, what does that mean exactly? I'll give you a few stats that you might know and you might not know. Many colleagues in our industry, when we launched LACOLAB and we said we need your allyship, whether you're a Latino or not, and we we told them that we have lost 50% representation in the past 10 years, they just couldn't believe it. So Latinos represent about 18% of the US population, yet we are about 30% of the box office in Hollywood. So that is incredible. We certainly like our entertainment. Yet we are only represented 3% in front and behind the camera, right? And we continue to show up, which is fantastic. We should absolutely make sure we show up for the content that our own community is producing, because sometimes we tend not to do that. But I would love to hear from anyone in the group. What do you guys think that happens when we send this message to Hollywood that sort of says it's not broken, it doesn't need to be fixing, because although we are not represented, we are not being hired to be in these productions, we are still going to show up and consume your content. We certainly all have a lot of opinions on what Hollywood could be doing better, but what could we do better as a community, as in Latinos, to maybe send a very different type of message? Anybody who wants to? That's an open question for a brave person to get going. Jaime, I see your face like you want to take this question.
No, I mean, that's a tough one, right? But I think I think that's a very good point that you're making, Beatrice, right? That we do over-index completely when we go to the box office. And I think even go to the place where movies are made, right? Where Hollywood, where decisions are made, right? Hollywood, Los Angeles County is about 50% Latino. And if you go to the people that work in Hollywood, I mean, it's less than 5%. Right. So I think you can even just look within Los Angeles County to sort of see there's a divide here, and it's not really doing anyone any favors. And I think from my standpoint, all I can sort of tell, and we often tell Hollywood, is that Latino products work. I mean, you can look at so many examples, but most recently, obviously, Coco. Right. Coco was a film that did so well and was actually #1 in China for 6 weeks. Right. I think that we often think like, Hollywood executives often say, can Latino stuff travel? Beatrice, you and I know very well the history of Televisa as well, which is obviously Spanish language content, but that used to travel all over the world. And those actors and actresses couldn't go to Europe without being mobbed. So there is so much opportunity when you tell our stories, and there's good business there too. So, I think for us, it's just we have to keep reminding Hollywood of these facts, because it's very easy to forget them. But ultimately, I think if we keep reminding them, that's a big active step in the right direction.
Yes, absolutely. And I also think, like, if we were in more positions of power, right? If we were the CEOs of the networks, of the studios, if we were the presidents, we certainly wouldn't need to be justifying or continuing to, because sometimes it feels like a real uphill battle, right? Every meeting is like, here's the data. This is why we are good ROI, good business opportunity. We have to justify ourselves so much of why Latinos matter. And it's exhausting. We all do it every day with our work, but there are days when you're just like, oh my God, if today I didn't have to over explain like why we're a good business or why we matter, it would be an amazing day. But we are not in those positions of power. We're not even second next to be the president and the CEO of the networks, studios, or streaming services. So eventually we'll continue to have to do this, and by default, maybe in 20 years, our kids or grandkids will be those studios heads, and that's going to be a beautiful day. But anybody have any thoughts or any ideas on how we can accelerate our power into Hollywood? And I promise I wouldn't pick on anybody, but I do want to talk to you, Stanley, because I always see somebody like a Charles King, who I have so much respect for from Macro. He's done it so well, right? Like, he's just brought these amazing, powerful voices, next generation and old generation of storytellers, and unapologetically been that studio for the Black community, among many other studios. I'm quoting Charles just because he's a dear friend and I have a lot of respect for him. But it seems like we have a lot to learn from claiming our power, having a bigger voice. And this is the topic of this conference, right? Like, tu voz, tu poder, your voice, your power. From an outside perspective, Stanley, how do we come into our own with a bit more swagger in Hollywood, to get that sort of to accelerate our positions of power? It might be two different questions, but either way that you want to go with it.
Well, first and foremost, as I look at just the construction of this panel, including our moderator, this is the future, right? This is the power central that is here, and that's going to propel that next generation. I come out of film, television, and music, but I currently represent the the U.S. video game industry. So I think it's important to see like what are the growth opportunities within our industry for the Latino community. We see, for example, that 72% of Latinos 13 and over self-identify as gamers, and that 33% U.S. Latino households have a video game console. And so you see that there's a massive gaming opportunity, but it also means not only is there an opportunity for games and playing, but for career development. And if you look at some of the research that Pew Research has done on workforce, maybe 16% of U.S. workforce is made up of Latinos, but only 7% in STEM careers. That's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So huge opportunity for growth there. And what our industry really needs are innovations and storytelling. And so when you're talking about workforce opportunities and the brilliance you see not only on this panel, but in the communities at large, you've got different routes into power. And it's a matter of seizing those opportunities of not only thinking about how do I get into those roles, but how do I get behind the screen, right? How do I get behind the game, become a game developer, become a storyteller within the game context? And I think once you're able to identify that unique ability, it provides lots of growth opportunities, including on the corporate side. I know this is a lot of talking about the creative, but on that corporate side, those decisions get made in those suites. And if you have people who understand those important elements of building what it means, like we're probably looking at a future CEO of one of the studios on this panel, given what they understand about how Hollywood works and how production works, and capitalizing on an opportunity and making that opportunity happen. So I think there's a lot of promise in the future, but particularly in our industry, the video game industry.
Okay, well, it's good to know that there is promise, because that's exactly what we need to keep going. I want to remind our participants that we'd love to hear your questions. So for all of the panelists or anybody that you're more interested in responding your particular questions, so please type your questions into the box on the right side of your screen. And Monica, I have a question for you. I'd love to hear your point of view as an actor, as a director, of I know you're a very big advocate for representation in our community. We heard from your bio, the multifaceted human that you are. And we are very lucky that you are there also fighting the fight along with all of us on this panel in a different way. What do you think, from your point of view and from what you've seen, because clearly you are at a place that many others are not, what could we do for those next generations to kind of accelerate that representation and, be in the places that you've been able to get to? And it's never easy. I'm sure it's like people say, well, you work hard to have what you have. I'm like, yeah, but there's a lot of other people that work really hard, maybe even harder than me, and they never got funding and they never launched a company. So how do we support this generation that's talented and that's deserving, but it's not there yet?
That's a great question. I feel like you've touched on it a little bit. I think our community needs to invest more in our community. And what I mean by that is to support each other's work, whether we're familiar with the artists or the studios or not, but showing up for the community is the act of building our representation as well. And it shows our demand of what we need as stories. I myself, it's been a struggle as an actor and then sometimes as a director, but I've sort of bulldozed my way through in front of the camera and behind it, but not without risk, right? So I was faced, for example, with potentially starring in a new TV show, and the role of the Latina was extremely stereotypical. And I had to sit my representations down and show them the script. And I said, so this is how we perpetuate the stereotypes of my people and my demographic. Don't show me these kinds of scripts anymore. Here's the stuff I'm interested in. And having to sort of be that explicit to communicate what I will represent and what I will not continue to represent, to take away power from the stereotypes and actually show representation of who we really are right now, that we can go just beyond the stereotypes that have been perpetuated over time. So for me, it's a lot of taking the risk of saying no and demanding your worth and demanding your value as an artist.
Yeah. And not to take away from people in our community that have to say yes to these other jobs that are stereotypical, right? Because they might have families to feed and a responsibility. And it's really tough. When I used to be in my previous life a TV producer, I would always say no to anything that was like in the border, and it was drug dealer, because I'm a border girl. I grew up in the border. So those were the only stories people thought about somebody like me, somebody who grew up in Tijuana. But I had the privilege to say no, right? I had the privilege to pass, and some other people are like, listen, I had to take it, right? Like, I just had to produce this because, we got to feed our family, we got to do what we can. So it's a tough place to be, hopefully, the more opportunities that writers get to write authentic voices for our community and authentic stories, then everybody wins. But it's a tough place to be. And we are very lucky to have you advocating for what is stereotypical and what is not, and not just advocating, but educating, right? The community in general, because, perception is reality. You grow up like that, and that's what you think, and that's, and it's not that, if you have a mind, I read sometime, it said, if you have a mind, you have a bias, right? Like, it might not be a bad bias, but there's a bias. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for educating our allies into what it is that is stereotypical that we don't want to continue to see in Hollywood. I'm going to go now to Jaime, because you have a very interesting and similar to Monica, because she's definitely on mainstream shows, and Ilana. I'm talking a little bit about Campanario, and I know Campanario Entertainment has always had the goal of producing mainstream programming that has a Latino lens to it, right? Why do you think it's important that we make that distinction, that it's not Latino entertainment, but that it's mainstream entertainment with a Latino point of view or lens?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's really important to celebrate the U.S. Latino experience, which is often we live in the mainstream. I think it's funny when you meet non-Latinos, even in Los Angeles or around the country, who just don't know anything about our culture, who really do watch these Hollywooden shows and think, oh, everyone's a gangbanger, or really do think that Mexico City is the most violent city in the world, right? Like these choices that Hollywood has made matter. And so I think for me, a big thing that we try to do with my company is sort of showcase that, Latinos are already part of the general market. We're already here. We already consume it. We love it. We know all about Game of Thrones too. It doesn't have to be in Spanish for us to enjoy it. And I think when you attack it from that lens, we hopefully are creating programming that then is universal, right? Because that's really our goal, right? And something we're really excited about for, Selena, the series, on Netflix, is the universality of that story. That show premieres day and date around the world. And how exciting is that? I think that everyone around the world should be able to hear the inspirational story of Selena Quintanilla and the Quintanilla family. And if you're an underdog, if you're someone that doesn't see themselves somewhere in the world, like you could be that way in Japan, you could have those feelings in Denmark, there's a story out there for you from our community. And I think that's really important for everyone to realize that, Latino values are mainstream values, Latino families are mainstream families, but we just don't see ourselves often portrayed that way. And I think Hollywood perpetuates that often by often saying, oh, go to the Latino division or go to these people. When I think, we're part of the mainstream division. You can talk to me too.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than that, right? Which usually means it's code for go to the very back of the building next to the supply closet. I get in a lot of trouble for making this comment. Jaime's been with me on panels on this. And then, go to that, the diversity person, the Latino person, the whatever. And, my colleagues who are Latinos and say, how could you say this? Like, this is terrible. I'm like, well, when we talk in confidence, you tell me you have no money, you have no budget, you have no power in this company. It's true. You need to be sitting at the same table. You don't need to be segregated into the Latino corner in the back office with no money and no power when we are 30% of the box office. We can't have that immigrant mentality anymore where we are calladito, te ves más bonito, quiet, you're prettier. And, it mortifies my mother every time, she's probably mortified in the next room hearing me say this, but I'm like, Dad, keep your head down, mijita, and just be quiet and do your work. It doesn't serve our community today. It might have been okay when people immigrated and you had to keep a low profile. We need to take up space. We need to not keep a low profile, right? We need to stop being invisible. We heard it in the opening remarks, and I think we just need to change this chip. And for the ones of us who are parents, we need to change that immediately with the next generations, or tios or tias, that's good too. But absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. And when Stanley said, there's people here who will be the future presidents or CEOs of studios, we already have them here, right? With Jaime as the president of his own studio, right? Just like Desi Arnaz did many years ago. We don't need to be waiting to be the next CEO of, another studio. We could build our own studios. So we're very proud that you are doing that. So excited with the slate that you have all over Hollywood. And we promise to continue to support and be your cheerleader. So thank you for everything that you're doing, amigo. Very, very proud of that. Stan, back to you, because I want to talk about the massive power of gaming, right? We've been talking a lot, much more on the TV side, the film side, but our community is massive. And I was trying to do the research before we came on, but I'm sure you'll have the numbers better than I, on how incredible, our community is when it comes to gaming. They're definitely over-indexing. I read that post-pandemic, the numbers have only been on the rise. How focused are you, or how focused are your colleagues in the gaming industry in this demographic as a metric of growth success, more than as a metric of let us check off the box during Hispanic Heritage Month and do the right thing? How are you approaching that? Because it seems like it's a massive opportunity, even beyond the numbers that we see from Hollywood.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, 72% of Latinos 13 and older self-identify as gamers. So right there, you have a tremendous market, but also that's where the job opportunity comes, because more and more our industry relies on great innovation and great storytelling. And so all the things you're talking about on the Hollywood side bear true even more so in our industry as it continues to grow and creating those opportunities. And so you're seeing things to make the games more accessible to people from different backgrounds, like customization of characters, being able to change your skin tone and how you portray yourself, which actually makes you feel more welcomed in the game and just brings you closer to the experience. But also opportunities to progress in education, because people who love these games love knowing what happens beyond the game. And I think our industry is looking for more of that talent. We want the homegrown talent, we want to develop it, and we want it to work in our industry, because there's so many opportunities to reach people on a worldwide basis, because that's what people are doing, particularly in the age of COVID. They're playing games to connect, even more so than just playing. And if they can play with characters who really resonate with their experience, all the better. And we're seeing that growing all the time in our games. But we need more engagement and participation in the Latino community. So it's a priority.
So how do our kids get into these jobs? Where do we point them? Where can they go? Where do they get information? What could we be doing to, not just, as we know, gamers, obviously they're 70%, which is massive. How can they be telling their stories? How can they be designing these games? How do we open those doors?
Well, first and foremost, there are two routes in, right? There's this, well, there are really three, but the two that I'm thinking about are, there's a technical
Give
phase
us the shortest one, the shortest path to success.
No, they're
We have no
important.
time.
There's coding, right, and learning that science base of how the game gets made from a technical standpoint. There's the storytelling, because you got to be able to drive more narrative these days in games. Games aren't just Pac-Man anymore. They're lush, beautiful-looking games. If you see the modern game, it looks like a movie. And then the other is, there's this third route, which I've taken, which is more of a corporate route, is taking all the things you've learned in these other disciplines, film, television, music, which are all combined with coding in a video game, and trying to figure out, like Monica talked about earlier, not just waiting for an opportunity, but creating those opportunities for leadership and bringing your own flavor to it. Because what point is there to all this if you're not going to bring your own flavor to it and make your vision the vision for your next opportunity or moment? So I think there's tremendous growth, and it's irrespective of whether you're right brain, left brain, artistic, or more corporate, just huge opportunities for this growing industry.
So understood, and we will be, we're advocates of course, kids learning STEM at a very young age, especially Latinas. There's so many programs around town. The Eva Longoria Foundation actually does a beautiful job with after-school programs for our Latina community. So yes, definitely get them on early into coding and into technology is very, very important. Also, to be able to succeed in the jobs of the present and the future. But in entertainment, we have a lot of organizations that are on the nonprofit side, advocacy side, that hyper focus on preparing our writers or directors or producers. There's the NALIPs, there's the HMCs. What is equivalent to that in the gaming industry, if anything? And if there's not, then amazing opportunity for somebody thinking, any Latino thinking of a nonprofit that is, one of 100 that already exists. Hopefully, they will maybe take on the route of the gaming industry. Or is there something that already exists that we could point our community into those internships, mentorship, support, job opportunities? Is there a place, or do we need to build it?
I think there are a lot of opportunities in lots of different cities. You have organizations like Girls Make Code, Black Girls Code, and like organizations that look at Latinx populations. And so I think from city to city, there are these groups. Some of them are video game specific, but most of them are more STEM because it provides you with broader opportunities to get into the science, math, engineering, and technology space. So I think there are lots of these organizations in various cities around the country, and I'm happy to share them.
Okay, so we're gonna look at you maybe for a tweet or something where you can give us some links of some opportunities for our community, as we never have front and center gaming as much as we have the other jobs. And I agree with you. This is a massive opportunity. Thank you so much for all your insights. And now off to Yolanda. Amiga, I love your story because, you and I have been friends for a while, but more than anything, I've been your client on the TV side. And, the thing that we all have heard from networks and studios is that they can't find us, right? Somehow they can't find the talent, they can't find the showrunners, they can't find the writers. You've made a successful career out of finding us. You've had no trouble finding us. Now you are inside of Amazon, which I am beyond thrilled to hear. Amazon is part of our LACO Lab advisory board. So excellent that they are there. And so is Netflix, that I know Jaime is doing something well, he's doing obviously the Selena series with them. Is there an openness now that you are inside this? And I know you are a very recent hire and you've been working from home through the pandemic, but I think it's always very hard to, already be an A-lister when you've never been given an opportunity. So I'd love to know how you are approaching this casting task that you have now. Is there going to be an openness? Hopefully there is. And I mean, it sends a very big signal that they've hired you to be there, to really placing bets on new talent, right? That, it might be somebody you don't know, but we are going to take quote unquote a risk and give the new people an opportunity, because obviously there's 10 people that we all know the names that cycle through Hollywood on the A-listers, but we need to take some bets once in a while. Is Amazon going to be that studio with you in there?
Yes, I think, like you said, I think the first approach for them towards that is that they hire me. But I think the few months that I have been there, Amazon really the goal is to go with the industry leader amplifying diversity with the Latinos, with creatives, with on all single levels. We already have deals with Gloria Calderon Kellett, with Francesca Celedon, Mota, Wise Entertainment, Diego Luna, Gael Garcia, Selena Gomez, J Balvin, Eva Longoria. So I think it is a great opportunity to be there. And yes, it's open. There have been already opening to new faces. We see Cristina Rodlo in one of the shows a year ago before she went to Whiskey 69. So yes, they're very open to it. And my boss is very open to that. And I think having a voice inside, being an executive, in a high-level executive, as my position helped even with the story. I get the scripts and I can even point out, like, this is not what we do. This character is not. This is Afro-Latina. This can never be this. This is Mexican. So I think within us, we have a rich story to tell, a different colors, different pattern. And I think that's very important for us. And I'm very glad and happy that they hire me, and I think it's a great opportunity. And a little bit of what you say before, if I can say something, prepare
Of
themselves.
course.
Like Stanley says, if we want executives, then go to the school for that. Go radio, television, and film. Prepare yourself. We need to, our voices not just in front of the camera, behind the camera. So we need to go and do business. So you can be a business affair in the industry. So it's in different positions, and I think the studios, when they open and give us the opportunity to be in those key places, we're going to start making changes.
For sure. And
Yeah.
I think, we definitely need to diversify of how we think ourselves in roles. And just like Stanley had said, we need to be in the rooms where the green light process happens, right? And there's
Yes.
many executives there.
Yeah, and also Amazon Studios since 2018, they have been partnering with Hollywood Reporter to do diversity young executives program. So I think that's very important because it's not the same to being like when I was independent to being part of, like, it's a different situation. So I think that's, for me, if they go to colleges, universities. So I think also for people to look out when they have those opportunities so they can enroll themselves on it.
That's
And be
great. Well,
part of
listen,
it.
just like,
Internships, everything.
okay.
Sorry.
Well, of course. Just like I was telling Monica, it's great to have your voice, your insight, your point of view inside Amazon. They certainly have been leading for a while and wanting to do things right, like many of our other partners on the studio side, on the streaming side, on the network side. But always excited that you're able to raise your hand, that you get to be that executive in the room for us saying, hey, you might want to consider a real Afro-Latina or Latino for this role, because there's plenty, and we could certainly find you one. I know where to find them, and that voice needs to be heard versus just somebody that might look the part and they're not that authentically involved within that particular story or pain point, whatever it might be. So thanks for doing your regular job, but also doing the role of that small education, but it is very important. It's exhausting, you'll see, but it's important. So everybody, we all do it. So thanks for being there. It gives me great ease to know all of you guys are doing such a big part of what we need to do to really change our numbers and our representation. And Ilana, last but not least, we had never met until we prepped for this panel, but I am a fan. I just, when we talk about, ideas or messages that resonate, or kids being able to dream bigger than what they have seen, our friend Christy Halberger also says, you can't be what you can't see. I don't know if it's from her or from someone else, but I heard her say it and I couldn't agree more. You creating a show that is exactly that gives me so much pride. But also you being, someone in the industry, I know they don't call in entertainment, this is not a thing, but in the VC community, in the tech world, this is a thing, right? Who is the 1% that's going to hit it big and becomes that unicorn super company that nobody was expecting? And when we looked at our showrunner numbers, when it came to Latinos in Hollywood, it was really depressing. We did the Latino Donor Collaborative did a report during our LA Collab event, La Collab event at Sundance, and it was 1%. So when we talk about 5%, 3%, you are definitely on we have to treat you with put you in a place that nothing could ever happen to you. You're so precious as a showrunner, but also as a storyteller and the stories that you are telling. Talk a little bit about, sort of your journey there, because I'm sure if the percentage is 1%, it must not be easy getting there, and also a story that's not the stereotypical story that sometimes it's easier to buy because that's a perception of who we are.
Yeah. Well, I feel very, very fortunate. I mean, those statistics are dismal. And I hope that people, the same way that when I was coming up, I saw people like Gloria Calderon-Kellett, Tanya Saracho, and the same way, honestly, that I'm trying to do in my show in showing a Latina girl who grows up to become president, that people can see me, that I'm telling my stories, that I'm running my show, that I have creative control, and that they can feel inspired. So I like to say, The only thing that separates an emerging writer from a writer is access, right? Like I had access and I had privilege, and I started as an assistant, and I landed on a show, the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, where I had bosses who nurtured my voice, who supported my voice, and who promoted me, who gave me episodes, who like lifted me up. So as I've risen, I have felt an obligation to do that, to ensure representation in front of and behind the camera, to make sure that I am promoting, that I am giving opportunities. Because if someone had not taken a shot on me, I wouldn't be here. But I think also in terms of like the industry showing up for each other, it's important for me to note my privilege as a white Latina, and the industry needs to support and nourish all Latina voices. And I'm so grateful for my opportunities, but our support has got to be intersectional, the same way Yolanda was talking about. Like our diaspora is vast, and our industry needs to recognize, greenlight, support, and nourish all of our voices. Of Indigenous Latine, Afro-Latine, trans non-binary. Like it can't just be, we did our diversity homework, like we're good now. Like we need to expand our definition of diversity and support those projects as well.
Absolutely. And that is incredibly important. I mean, listen, it's a very, uncomfortable topic, right, to talk about privilege, but it's a very important one to have, right? I'm an immigrant. I did not grow up in the U.S. So I was a Mexican, the same as every other Mexican. So being Mexican was never sort of something I thought while in Mexico that was sort of a problem. Maybe being a woman, because I was maybe the first of many things. But when I came here and somebody one day said, well, you've gotten all these opportunities. Not that I didn't work hard, but I do see other people working as hard or harder. And it's like, it's your white Latina privilege. And it's the first time I'd ever heard it. And I thought, what? Like, no, like I've worked so hard for this. And they're like, no, like, think back, like, what was your first job? What's your first job? And I was like, my first job was in radio when I was a kid. And listen, I worked so hard for that job, and I practiced so much on my radio. It's like, but how did you get that? Like I was like, well, like my dad knew the owner of a radio station, and I got an audition, right? Like there were thousands of kids, and they picked me, and maybe I was one of the best. Maybe they gave. I mean, I don't know, right? But I was like, had my father not known the owner, had I not known there's a casting, I don't know that I'd be where I am today. I don't know, right? I might still be in Tijuana, just, I don't know, married and maybe being a grandma of a lot of cute kids. And that's not a bad thing. But somebody opened the door for you. So two things. One, the privilege that we should never forget as we are, whether you're a white passing Latino or not. Privilege is privilege, right? So who opened the door for you? Who was able to get you into your first job is very important. So we have that responsibility. Everyone in this panel, everybody who's ever been given an opportunity to do the same for our community. I mean, I think that is super important. We are going to move now because we could stay. This topic should be a topic for next year, Marco, so you remember it, because this is a very hot topic that we should be addressing. But we have to move on. We promised the audience some Q&A, so we want to hear from them specifically what it is that they're interested in hearing from you, because we might have been talking about things I'm sure they care about, but they might have more pressing questions. So I'm going to be looking very quickly here live at the questions of the audience, and I'll be asking you a few of them. Okay, here's a question from Nina, and it says, Latinx representation on screen is limited and tends to only highlight, oh wow, this is perfect, white Latinx, brilliant. The universe is with us. How can we ensure Afro-Latinx are included in our media? I think we talked a little bit about that, but I mean, if anybody else would want to expand more on the specific point of Afro-Latinx, that would be fantastic. I think that we need to be mindful, and we need to make sure it's included, and we need to show that intersectionality. But if anybody else has a more specific suggestion, Ilan, I think you had already explained it beautifully, but anybody want to add anything, or we can move to the next
I think it also comes down, can you hear me? I think it also comes down to stories, to have more stories written for them. More roles that is written for them, because it's part of our community, and usually they don't write stuff for them. So like Monica was saying, she makes her own, so she has more opportunity about that.
Right. Right. Yeah. So no pressure on you, Ilana, but you know, I know you will be giving this opportunity in the writers' room, just like Tania Saracho has done so brilliantly, and Gloria Calderon, to that next generation of diverse intersectional voices. So we will all be very vigilant on that, and any suggestions the audience has, I'm always asking for who's the next one up so we can support. So yes, we need to be very, very vigilant of that. Okay, the next question is from Oscar Torres. Um, I think one before that, Arturo Juarez. How can the studio show they are tangibly committed to producing content that tells our stories, celebrates our culture, and it is led by people of color on screen and behind? I mean, I think we talked a little bit about that already. You know, when we have our positions of power, when we are in the green light room, or going the alternative way with a studio like a Campanario, where you certainly don't need to worry about any of those things. That is the mission of the company, and that's absolutely front and center. Having somebody like Ilana be a showrunner and writing those stories, absolutely, we're ensure that. Having someone in casting like Yolanda or Monica, you know, directing episodes that are authentic. But anybody else who would want to add something else? Trying to get to as many questions as possible.
I'll just speak for a moment, which is that whether you're talking about it in the film space or the video game space, I think people have to be developing those stories on their own. Some of the most powerful things you see, these award-winning things, whether it's in video games or film and television, are very personal to the people, really conjuring it up, even if it's not autobiographical, of thinking about what that means. One of the things we do at ESA is we actually sponsor a video game competition among college and high school students and even young adults in Mexico, to develop games as a contest. And then the winner comes to our big show called E3 every year. And many of those games have been featured on Xbox, on PlayStation, on Nintendo. And so you're able to actually play the games that these burgeoning video game developers have made. So it's a matter of empowering people and saying, go tell your story and we'll provide you a platform to share it. Instead of, hey, we need a Latino character. Instead, it's, we need your voice. Tell us the story that you see. And I think you heard that in a lot of the stories you've been hearing today and what everyone's developing and working on. But I think you've just got to create the heart of it from your own sensibility and then look for the platform rather than.
Yeah, and I do want to make a distinction here that as you know, we all want to do smart productions during this pandemic, and I know shooting outside of the US obviously it's proven easier, or post-producing. I have a studio, I have a post-production studio outside of the US in Baja. You know, we always want to be very mindful of giving our kids here in the States those opportunities, right? The US born Latinos who grow up here, who tend to have less opportunities. You know, sometimes when we talk about representation, I remember the year that Roma had so many awards. Someone on the studio side said, well, I don't know what you're complaining about. You know, Roma, you know, has won all these awards. And I'm like, no, and that's fantastic. I think that is, yes, but on the U.S. side, right? It's not the same a movie that's shot in Mexico with a Mexican crew with than something here. The stories here from the stories in Mexico are very different, and the people who make them and those voices are very specific. So I think it's important also to not, you know, forget about the kids in our own communities in the U.S. Even though it's obviously with pandemic easier to shoot abroad, cheaper to post-produce abroad, you know, keep a part of your budget to at least do, you know, a few of the things here. And we understand there's restrictions, but I always try to keep it front and center as part of the support for our own people in the US. I think that's very important. Here's another question from Cindy Ramos. And I apologize if I butcher anyone's name here. I am so blind, and this letter on my phone is very small. There's so many aspects of the entertainment industry. What, in your mind, would you say are the top 2 doors to enter to start to gain experience? The top 2 doors to enter to gain experience.
I think, if I may, I don't know about top 2. I can speak to my path, which was through being an assistant. Which again, like we talk about access. I mean, I feel like entertainment is we're like an entry-level job out of college that pays so much less than so many other entry-level jobs. Like I've, you know, talked to people like, why would you go and be a PA if you could be a consultant and make so much more? So I think as an industry, we need to sort of reckon with that and pay assistants, what they deserve. But I came in as an assistant, and I that to me, it's like if you can get a job as in any aspect of entertainment as an assistant, you will learn everything. And then even if it's not your dream job, your dream show, I worked on a period drama, I worked on a sci-fi comedy, I worked on an animated sketch show, I worked on so many different kinds of shows. And I learned something new, distinct, and different from each one. So that by the time I was sort of like ready to run my own show, I was armed with experience. So even if it's not your dream job, your dream show, like you will learn, you will meet people. It is easier to find a job once you have a job. You will meet people. I got jobs through the people I knew from the places that I currently was, who just knew I wanted to be in comedy, or I wanted to, go to half hour, or certain things like that. So I would say if you can get a job as an assistant, as an intern, hopefully paid, in this industry, is in any capacity, and then from that you can whittle it down and from find your niche from there. But don't be discouraged if you don't have your dream job immediately, because I certainly did not.
That's very good insight. That's excellent. Stanley, there's a very particular question for you. And it is from Lily, and it says, what can the video game industry do to bring more Latinx characters into video games and increase representation within the video games? We know already we're over-indexing in the playing side of it.
No, that's a fantastic question. One of the things you're seeing is being able to customize your character to look like you or anyone you want to be. So I think that helps in terms of getting people to feel more connected to the games. I think you're also seeing some of the major studios think about this issue a lot more. We had a big game developers conference, and there was a Latinx panel where Sony and Bungie and other companies talked about what it takes to be in the industry, and that hall was packed. You're also seeing games like Overwatch have important characters like Sombra, a really important character in the game, who's a great hacker. Life is Strange 2 by Square Enix has Sean and Daniel Diaz, who have these telekinetic powers, and they move back to Mexico to escape some bad guys. So you're seeing more and more characters come in, but the bottom line is we need more people to come in and tell those stories. They're happening, and they happen sometimes organically and sometimes because you have such an audience that you want to appeal to that audience. So it's happening, but it needs to happen at a much, much higher level. And it's going to take more voices coming in and saying, here's how we're represented, and here's how we should be looking. To Monica's point, you've got to figure out how you want to be represented, and being at the table gives you more of a voice to say, this actually empowers, this perpetuates the stereotype, but being in the room helps you make that decision, or at least identify the issue for consideration.
Got it. Okay, perfect. We have a lot of questions. I'm going to try to, there's a few that are COVID related, so I'm going to try to sort of merge them. One is, what lessons are industry leaders learning from COVID-19, and how do you plan to take them into the future of entertainment? So we have, different sides of the spectrum here, with somebody like Stanley, where business is booming, somebody like a Jaime, who it's not like business is not booming, but there was certainly a stop put into the timing of when the production was have to be made, as I'm aware. So I think let's talk about the ones who were a bit more challenged. So, projects that had stalled that I think now are back going, things that you might need to now shoot abroad, different types of protocols. Whoever can speak a little into that more, I think, than into the thriving. There's always opportunities where there's a crisis. So we've certainly seen that happen on the gaming side. But for the people not on the gaming side, any things that you think this will be a bit of the new normal, will never look the same? What does the new normal look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a new normal, but I think it's also an exciting, this is such an awful thing that's happened, especially for the Latino community. But I think one of the things that has given Hollywood a chance to sort of reevaluate how we go into production and how we do it. How can we make sure that every production we do is even safer than before? And so I actually think that this is promoting better things for production. I think this is better for production in the long run. Like, yes, there's a lot of protocols. Yes, there's a lot of new things you have to take into account. But ultimately, these are things for the better. It's ultimately things for the safety and health of the crew, which is ultimately what we really care about, right? I think when you're creating a production, you're creating a family, and for every industry we're talking about here, you're really creating a community. And I think for that community, we just have to make sure that they're as safe as possible. So yeah, COVID has definitely thrown a wrench into Hollywood. It's slowed a lot of productions down, shut down a lot of productions. But I think now that we're slowly starting to figure out how we can do it. Tyler Perry was a great example of how to do it safely and quickly. And so I think as we look to, other colors of, other peoples of color like Tyler Perry, it's possible to do it and safely. And so I think we just have to continue to do that and hopefully never lose sight of these new values that we're promoting, because ultimately the betterment of the production.
Great. Monica, from your end, from more of like in front and behind the camera, anything that you think will be dramatically changed in the future on how, we used to do things and we don't? And we'll have just quick, also final remarks from each of you in a second.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Jaime is right about hoping that this works out for the better, but I will be very blunt. It is difficult. It's challenging. We're learning this as we go. The thing we have going for us is that every single one of us in Hollywood, we're sort of doing it together. We don't really know how this is going to work, but we're communicating and being very explicit about what those rules look like, what those guidelines are, so that there's a sort of a cohesive approach to make sure everybody's as safe as possible. And I think equally as important to stay at work, right? We need to stay at work. So it's going to be different, but I do know one thing: after many years, like all of you guys here in this business, we are a very resilient industry. We are very, we can adapt to anything. We're flexible and we know how to make it work. So this industry, we will figure it out by hook or by crook. Yeah, and I just want to say finally, Beatrice, thank you so much for leading our panel today. I'm really excited to meet all of you, and also like I want to say to the to like the young girls out there and the young boys out there, we're out here working, and we're going to try to keep writing our stories and doing our best, my best, to represent my community and pushing the envelope. I'm interested in challenging ourselves and in getting better every day. That's my commitment as a storyteller. And so we're out here. We're trying, doing the work.
And our commitment will be to show up for you and for your work, Monica, for sure. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing. Stanley, any final words of wisdom?
I think in order to succeed in any of these fields we're talking about, you need a plan, you need belief, and you need allies. And each of them takes a lot of work. And that's what it takes to succeed in all these fields. And so I would just tell people to always be working on your plan, have a great level of confidence, and surround yourself with people who are going to help push that envelope further for you.
Absolutely. I think allyship for our community is an absolute must, and we need to have that front and center. So Stanley, thanks for being an ally. And I know you're going to be helping us with all those hookups and links where we can be sending our kids to get going in the gaming industry. Thank you in advance.
Absolutely.
Ilana?
Yeah, I mean, if there's any writers out there who want to be showrunners, who want to tell their stories, I'll say don't try to fit into any kind of mold of what you think Hollywood wants you or your voice to be. Be authentic to yourself and tell your story. And that doesn't mean it has to be autobiographical, inspired by your childhood. It's more, what is the story that only you can tell? What the industry needs is your voice. You approach it with passion and authenticity, you cannot go wrong. And thank you for having me.
And we're excited to have your voice in Hollywood. Thank you. Yolanda.
Just gonna say that thank you for having me. Thank you, Beatrice, for everything. But I think that if you want to succeed also, like Ilana said, go and do an internship, be an assistant. Casting, we need Latinos. We don't have that many Latinos in casting. So go and apply to all the big casting directors, all those shows that you like. Go look at IMDb, see who's the casting director, prepare yourself, and dream big and work hard.
Well, we'll be hitting you up for some internships and for some mentorship, amiga. I know you're busy, but it would be great to get some more Latinos in casting. Thank you so much. And certainly not last but not least, Mr. Jaime Davila.
I'll just say get excited. There's a lot of great shows. The series, In the Heights, Diner for Future President. Get excited, everybody.
Get excited and show up for our community. It's very, very important. I want to thank you all. You guys have been amazing panelists, but mostly I want to thank you for the work that you keep doing for our community every single day in Hollywood. We are honored to have you represent us, and it was an honor to be able to moderate this panel. So thank you all for your work and for your time today. Thank you. And for everybody out in the audience, please keep tweeting about the conference at hashtag CHCIHHM20. We encourage you to attend sessions for the rest of the day and for the rest of the week. We are celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, and what a perfect way to start it. Now that you're registered, you can attend any session. To find a session you're interested in, just go to www.chcihhm.org/agenda. So that might have not sounded very easy, but chcihhm.org/agenda. I did it. And if you know people who would be interested in the conference but haven't signed up yet, encourage them to log in and register at chcihhm.live. And as you guys know, it is absolutely free. So it would be great to have everybody who needs to be a part of this conversation, not just Latinos, but our good allies as well. And please join our virtual gala celebration on Monday evening, September 21st from 6 to 8 p.m. Once you register for the conference, you will also be registered for the gala. So nothing more to do than to log back in. And with this, we finish our session for today on the future of entertainment. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Please support, please use your voice. That is the theme of this conference, because we need it today more than ever. We need to end our invisibility, not only in Hollywood, but in America as a whole. We are already the present. We are already driving so much of the economy, the GDP growth, the workforce, the new businesses. We need to walk into every single space and every single room with a swagger that we deserve and that we have earned. So here to our very resilient community, stay loud and stay present and be visible. Thank you very much.